of the frame, and all you'll have is the background. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, good morning. I'm Georgia Farr, Creations by Georgia, and also a supporter of the African American Museum and Archives. And this morning I'm going to be talking about my Underground Railroad quilt, which is hanging here behind me. And say something, George.
Oh, hello. I'm George from the African American Museum, and we welcome Georgia here. Georgia's been one of our longtime supporters, and were you one of the founders of the Baxter quilting show, or you just participated?
Yes, I'm a member of the Baxter Threads quilt class under Erica Millbrooks at Baxter Community Center.
And every year you all do a
Every 2
absolutely
years,
phenomenal.
Every 2 years we do a quilt show exhibiting our work for the year, and we usually follow a theme. The year that I did the Underground Railroad quilt was the year that I joined the class, was allowed to come in and did this quilt to learn traditional quilt blocks. I've been sewing since I was 8 years old, most of my life, and my business is Creations by Georgia. I started that in 1992, and I do Afrocentric wearable art. So I use scrap fabrics that I had on hand. It's all new fabrics, but they're scrap fabrics because I was learning and I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was practicing. And this is the result of that class. And then in 2017, we had the quilt show where we exhibited our quilts. And the Underground Railroad story, of course, with Harriet Tubman being the most famous conductor of the Underground Railroad, freeing enslaved people, getting them to the north and on to Canada or wherever it was safe for them to be. She was the conductor of that Underground Railroad. And over here on the side, I have two small wall hangings that I put together, one up here with her, and then Paul Collins' Underground Railroad painting that he did. And then also I have a quilt block here on the bottom with a poem on quilting by Nikki Giovanni. So just to talk a little bit about the quilt and the blocks, and if we start up here in the top with this block here, that's called the Underground Railroad or Jacob's Ladder. As we know, slaves were not allowed to write anything down. They were not allowed to even know how to write or to read. So everything was passed through the slave quarters orally. And from plantation to plantation, and many times it was the blacksmith that would tell them what to do. And this is the wrench, signifying the blacksmith, which would be somebody who was trusted, but it would be someone who was also helping the slaves. So they would, when they would see a quilt that would display either any of these symbols, and I've got 15 different symbols here, it was giving them a message. And the quilts would be displayed on clotheslines or hung over a fence or hung in a window, and you may have had a whole quilt that was one block signifying a direction or what to do or a message, or you may have had just a block within that quilt. So if you had a block that was like this one here with the wrench, that was to get ready. It was going to be time, usually in the spring of the year. It's time for you to start getting ready to make your run for freedom. This is the wagon wheel block. That's signifying that somebody is waiting to take you a distance by wagon. This here, birds of the air. You may want to follow the path of the birds, and they would usually go in the spring, of course, when the weather is starting to get nice. So you would follow the birds because they would be flying from the south back north, their migration. You may have this patch here is the bear claw path, and that is telling them to follow some of the tracks that are in the woods that the animals have made. So follow the bear claw. Here, of course, would be that you need food. So you need provisions. You need to gather some food and wrap them in a kerchief or a rag or something that you can carry some food with you. Things that would keep, like fruits and vegetables or nuts and grains and things like that, that you could carry to sustain yourself. But along the way, there were always sympathetic abolitionists who were in homes throughout. They would signify usually with a lantern in their windows or word of mouth. You would know that this was a safe place for you to go. And so you could stop and get food. So that could be signifying that there's food available. Here is the crossroads. This patch lets them know you're almost there. You're halfway. You're around Ohio, Cleveland, someplace around there. So you're almost there. So just keep going. So this is that. This patch here is called the log cabin. And the center changes. The black center has a meaning, the red center has another meaning, and the yellow center would have another meaning. So I put a black one in here, and I can't remember, and I can't tell you right now what that meant, but I will look that up and get that information to you. This again is birds of the air, follow the birds, and you're always going north. So there were other migration paths that enslaved people followed. Some of them may have gone south, they may have gone, but right now we're talking about Harriet Tubman and what she did and the way she escaped herself, and then she went back and brought enslaved people. This one here is telling you you're getting close to a town, you're not safe to look like a slave, so dress yourself up. And they would have known back here to either take something that was good, something that looked like their church clothes or whatever, or that you can go to a safe house and they will have clothes for you to put on so you can blend in with the rest of the people in that town. The arrows here on this one is signifying different directions that you may want to follow. This is also birds of the air following. This one down here is called the drunkards, and you can't see that. Let me see if I can move my camera so you can see that one a little bit.
That's
This is
pretty
the drunkard's path. So in this one, it's saying just don't follow the way of the past, but you got to get into the woods. You got to get off the path because there may be someone following you, because we know that whenever a slave or an enslaved person was running for freedom, somebody was behind them trying to catch them and bring them back. So this is just signifying that you need to walk in a uneven path. I'm trying to, okay, this is the boat signifying the water. This one, if you're going on to Canada, you're going to have to get on a boat. And so this is what this is signifying. And of course, this particular block here is the North Star, signifying the North Star. And this could have been at the beginning. It could be anywhere through here, because throughout their journey, they're going to be following the North Star that's going to take them to the north. And then there's a poem about the entire journey. That's the last patch of this quilt. So this is the Underground Railroad quilt. The top portion is just a little bit of the history of my business Creations by Georgia. The very first coat that I made out of mud cloth is depicted up here in the corner. And that was in 1992, where I took different pieces of mud cloth and put them together and made that jacket, and made a hat with it. This was another one of my pieces where I merged different pieces of fabric together to make a garment. There are 11 different pieces of fabric that I put together to make this jacket. And then in 2010, I entered a coat in the Art Prize Grand Rapids, and the coat was named Zyra, and that was on display there. That was a wonderful experience to make that garment and to have it on display. It is now hanging in my closet. It is a coat that I've cut down and I wear it during the winter months along with a hat. So this is the Underground Railroad story. We give credit to Harriet Tubman for helping to get over 300 people out of slavery into freedom. And she made over 19 trips back and forth. That was her life's work. And then she went on to do other things with the U.S. Army. She was a gifted, God-sent woman who was enslaved, but that was not to be. None of our people wanted to be enslaved. That was forced labor, and they were always looking to break free. So the Underground Railroad was one path that was used to get them into freedom. Okay, any questions, George?
Oh, that was a great explanation of the Underground Railroad quilt. And you know, I believe we did have your quilt here on display, and we always had a lot of questions
Yes.
about it. People wanted to know who made them, whether there are any original ones available or still left around. And I think
Well,
what's
in
happened over years is that
yeah,
probably people have
the book,
morphed. Oh, go ahead.
the pattern that I followed is based on a story. Her name is Ozella McDaniel Williams. She was a slave who passed this story down the Underground Railroad, and then it was put into a book form. And this is the pattern that I followed in making this quilt. And it is available on Amazon and throughout. But this is my pattern of every quilt block and how to do it. And I had to have the help of gifted quilter Erica to show me how to put the different blocks together. But she has some pictures in her book of some of the original quilts. Like she has one in there that has, I think it's this one, Jacob's Ladder, and the entire quilt is Jacob's Ladder that would have been hung. So that was found in somebody's attic or in an old house or something. Wow. So some collectors may have some original quilts, but we know quilting has been an art form that has been passed down. We did it out of necessity at first because you needed something warm for the children and for your home. You needed warm bedding and couldn't just go out to Walmart and buy it. So they put together little pieces of fabric to make this a quilt or a warm piece of bedding. And we find that some people may have used the quilt on the floor because they didn't have a carpet on the floor and it was cold. So they may have sat on it. They slept under it. They wrapped in them and passed them through the families. And they are all works of art. I mean, a quilt, just doing this was so satisfying, putting this together and learning this. First, you make the block itself. And then you take and put all the blocks together and you have sashing in between if you want it, or you can just put it together other ways. But what makes it a quilt is that it's like a sandwich. It's got 3 layers of fabric. You have your quilt top. It's got batting in between, and then it has a backing on the back. So wow. There's just plain fabric on the back. And then it's put a binding. You bind it, and that's usually, in the beginning, it was all done by hand. my particular quilt, everything was done on the sewing machine. All of my blocks were put together on the sewing machine. My quilt itself, this is all my binding was put together on the sewing machine. But then all of my quilting inside of this, I did by hand, because hand stitching is how I started sewing. I started sewing with needle and thread before my mother bought me a sewing machine. So for years I was just sewing with the needle and thread, and that's has always been one of my favorite things to do. So on this quilt, all of my stitching to put the 3 layers together is done by hand. So, and that's called stitching in the ditch, where every seam is stitched all around by hand to put those 3 pieces together. And this particular quilt, I've made it as a wall hanging, but I have several that I've made in the class. And our class, we have some wonderful quilters in the Threads quilt class, and Erica, our instructor, is very patient with us in teaching us how to put these together. And this is a treasure. I'm sure that one day my family will probably fight over who gets it.
Georgia, could you talk one little thing about the heritage, I mean, with fabrics, especially the ones from Africa, the mud cloth, kente cloth, dinkra cloth, all convey a message. Is that something
Yes,
that
they do.
carried over
Yeah.
to the quilting,
The oldest, one of the fabrics when I first started, a friend of mine whose name is George Bayard gave me some pieces of African fabrics. And that's how I got started doing the Afrocentric wearable art. He gave me some samples of different pieces, and the kente. This border here is a print of kente, and it's the traditional orange, red, black, and green. And you'll find that that is a woven fabric from Ghana, and that is centuries old. The Africans would weave that fabric, and the original kente cannot be torn. It is woven in such a way that I have never had a piece of kente that I would cut. If I have a piece of it, I keep it as a piece, because they would wrap it on their bodies. They would wrap the kente. And each one of those designs means something to the person who wore it. There's a message for, there's a certain kente for a bride, a certain kente for the chief, a certain one that the mother might wear for different occasions. There was always a different kente, and that's made in Ghana, and that's indigenous, of course, to Africa. That's part of our heritage. And then we have the mud cloth. Mud cloth, I have a hat here that I can show you. There's a piece of it's mud cloth. Also interwoven in there is some wool. So, but this is a hat that I designed, and there's a coat that goes with it that I'm working on. Now, mud cloth is made with a cotton fabric. They're all 100% cotton, but it is the warmest, most beautiful fabric that I've ever seen. I have never really met any mud cloth that I didn't like. I mean, I can use the smallest of pieces or the largest pieces, and I just fell in love with doing that. So that's a handmade fabric that's made in Mali, and the men do the dyeing and the coloring on it, on the and the weaving of the fabric. And that's a coarser fabric. That's it's like it's elevated from a denim. It wears like denim, leather. Pieces that I have, my very first mud cloth jacket that I did, the young lady lives in Delaware. She bought it. She bought the hat, and that was in 1992, and she's still wearing that garment today. So that kind of puts me out of business, because when someone gets a piece of my art that's made out of those, they just keep wearing them because they don't wear out. They and the older they get, the better they look. So that's mud cloth, and that's made in Mali. I think I don't know if I said that or not. So those are two of the fabrics, and then we have the different prints of African fabrics that are throughout my quilt. Different pieces of African fabrics that we can buy now as yard goods, but it's just special. It's makes you feel good, makes you feel taller when you wear something that's made of any of these fabrics. The kente, I put kente and mud cloth pretty much on every garment I make. I don't, even if it's a garment that doesn't require that, the label has kente or it has mud cloth. And that's just something that I do. That's part of my art. And we all recognize it for what it is. Kings and queens have worn that. Our ancestors wore these fabrics.
Wow, that's so amazing, Georgia. We have a strong and rich history that goes back
Yes, we
centuries, and it's just so interesting to hear the ingenuity of the enslaved Africans and how they, worked their magic and worked with other people to get to the North and get to freedom. And something as innocuous as a quilt, um, hanging on a line was a message for a lot of folks, but fortunately not for the folks that were doing the chasing. And so,
right. So the messages, were in the quilts or in the art work of the quilts. Messages were also in song, and that's something I didn't say as I was talking, but there were songs that were sang. Swing low, sweet chariot, meaning, it's time to get to the water, and you're going to be going someplace. Different songs that were sung by the slaves, of course, had messages in them. And so, that's how they pass information through. And there have been some who try to discredit the fact that we were that smart as enslaved people, but we were, because they did not. We know that when they were stolen, when they were taken from their land, they didn't take slaves from their land. They took educated people. They took people who knew what to do with the land. They knew what to do with anything that was put in their hands. You have a rich heritage that they brought to the Americas with them. And these are some of the results of what came out of who we are as a people. So we no longer are victims, but we are victorious. We figure out a way. There's always a way. We didn't just sit in slavery, but we figured out a way. Freedom was something that we had at one time as enslaved people, and freedom was something we were always attempting to have. And we give credit to Harriet Tubman and others like her, William Steele, who kept the records of enslaved people, so that hopefully if their families were looking for them or somebody was looking for them, they could trace back where they came from and knew who they were and could find them. And he found his brother that way. His brother found him, because he was keeping the records. And it was a dangerous pursuit, because he was writing all of this information down, and if it had been found out by the authorities in power at the time, he probably would have been killed for doing that. And all of his information would have been stolen, would have been destroyed. But thank God it was not. Frederick Douglass was a famous abolitionist who worked to help get information back and forth. And there were others, many whose names we don't even remember or don't know, who helped. People, housewives, farmers, businessmen who were sympathetic to the cause and knew that this was wrong to enslave these people, and actually helped to get them to freedom. So it's a rich, rich history. I'm always honored to be able to talk about the quilting and talk about my quilt. All of us, pretty much every quilter who has a quilt probably has done an Underground Railroad quilt. So you have as many people that have done it. You have those different versions of the quilt, different colors of the quilt. One of the ones that I have wanted to do, that I will probably do if I continue, is with the red, black, and green.
Oh, yeah.
Erica has one, a small one that she did. But I would like to do, before the pandemic, I had gathered up my fabrics and I was going to do the red, black, and green. And then the pandemic hit, the virus, and people needed masks. And of course,
Okay.
during that time, we could not get out to the fabric store to buy, everything was closed. So I ended up having to use my red, black, and green fabrics making masks. So that was another protection for the people. So I used up many of my quilting pieces of fabric that I had here in the house and made masks. I did hundreds and hundreds of masks, and I'm still making masks for people. So stay safe.
Well, thank you, Georgia. This has been great. Talking with you, and we are certainly have been recording this, so we'll make it available for folks to hear your message about the Underground Railroad quilt. And certainly, we'll keep in touch and make sure that we have a space available in our new building coming up soon to display quilts. We
That would be
matter of
wonderful.
fact, because our name is Grandma, we like to do things that are related with grandmas. So we kind of imagine grandmas doing the quilting, and so every year we're thinking about maybe doing a competition or
Okay.
some type of raffle or something. We're gonna definitely have quilters as our friends when we move to our new building.
Okay.
So we thank you again,
Sounds good.
and,
Thank
and
you.
wish
Thank
you
you for
all the luck. And
allowing me to do this.
oh no, we love it. We love it. I'm gonna